Yeah, that looks good. Not as much light.
Do you have a song that you want to play, or just go right on into it?
Just go right ahead. Yeah, just go ahead.
Okay. All right. First, let me. Don't mind me. Clean this last bit off. Took me a little bit longer to get going this morning. Okay. That's not great, but it'll do the job. Okay. I'm going to ask everybody to join me in a moment of meditation or silent prayer, however you wish to use your time. Amen. Happy Sabbath again, everybody.
Sabbath.
I want to make sure that you can see as much of the board possible without getting it too cut off. Okay, that might be as good as it gets. Does it look okay to everybody?
Yeah.
All right, now this is going to be an interactive Sabbath. Okay, everybody ready? Everybody excited? Got your thinking caps on? No. This is going to be a continuation of the last time I spoke, which I think was 2 or 3 weeks ago, the July 24th. And interestingly, it's the same day, the same timestamp that Elder Tess has. I think it was her last day to present, where she, put the importance to us onto focusing on 3 things for right now. Keep the focus on menstruation so that we can fully understand how to not just respect women, but I mean, there's so many intersections that are at this study, at this subject of menstruation. So our studies on racism and homophobia or abuses to anybody for any reason actually kind of have as a center point this issue of menstruation. We'll kind of get into that a little bit later. The UN published a chart, which I'll be kind of going over the points on. I don't know if you guys remember seeing this chart that I think was shared in the Big Bible chat, where it shows all the different stats for the world of how not just women in third world countries are affected, but women, and not just women. I mean, I say women with the caveat of inclusion, including cis and trans women, not just cis, not just women born women, but also women born with the female body parts, but also women born with the male body parts that later assumed the life lived as a female. And I know that the wording on this will be a little sloppy until I settle into the the understanding, the right understanding of the cis-trans principles, I guess, that are kind of right now being examined. Not just right now. I mean, the world has been looking at this for decades. It's just new to us, I think. But to keep the focus on women and women's studies, primarily on menstruation. Remember the lines of the two streams, that there's much to learn and to unlearn, especially with the understanding that the two streams have one going to the Sea of Glass and the other going to the Lake of Fire. So there's one route, there's one stream of information that leads to life everlasting, and then there's another stream that leads to degradation and death. And the difference between those is I think menstruation, and it's not just me, it's several authors that I'll get to, but also having this this matter of importance being brought to us by our elders also solidifies where this can be kind of a fulcrum upon which all studies of equality rest. Studies of equality, not just with gender, but with gender, but with what gender entails. We also have workplace equality, educational equality, consumer equality with, we'll get into the pink tax or the tampon tax a little bit later. But so to understand the importance that these subjects bring, so it can be very easy, especially for guys, to say, oh, I don't want to think about it, I don't want to hear about it, I don't want to be around it. But this is one reason why it's so important, because for so long, us as a people, look at Ellen White's time, it was still considered unclean, so to speak. You know, it was spoken of. I tried to do a search on menstruation and then breaking it down into its component forms, like menstru with the star. And there were a lot of hits that resulted, but not much where she was speaking, you know, like counseling or you know, she had her focus on a lot of other issues. This wasn't shown to her as anything that caused consternation, you know, like slavery, because I don't think this was necessarily understood to anybody. I mean, science was still a very young, very burgeoning field. And while she had, you know, great understanding that the Lord gave her for a lot of things, you know, pertaining to science within our body, within our environment, within the planet, as far as tending to the earth, she also acquiesced to experts. She made it very known that when it came to history and science, if there were others with a higher authority, with further study or deeper knowledge and understanding on anything, then she said, great, correct me. So that's where some people differ with these two streams, where they see Ellen White as another thus saith the Lord, and only use thus saith the Lord to build their foundation. I don't know if many of you heard Elder Terry's presentation that it just released last night. Maybe it was in the early hours this morning, on now I'm not going to, the title of it just blanked from my mind.
I think it's rightly
But,
dividing the word.
That's it. Thank you. So the thing that I was talking about. So having a thus saith the Lord is also recognizing that we need to rightly divide the word, and how a lot of our foundations of understanding aren't necessarily held up by plain, straight, thus saith the Lord. We have to approach it with our methodology, with the parable methodology that Christ brought to the world.
Amen.
So we are tasked to understand Scripture, all the books of inspiration, all the books of history, all the books of science, and current events. We have to have within our minds all of these facets of prophecy, of existence, in order for us to know which direction to take. You know, so if we take this idea of the two streams and we see where they're meeting, where we are at that decision point of, okay, well, this goes one way and this goes another. We have to see how to spot which direction to go, because we know that they're going to be, or Satan's going to do his best, and not just Satan, but the conservative mindset that has taken over the world, how to have this proper understanding without getting beguiled, without having to say, okay, Lord, give me a sign, right? Because we've had signs all along. He's given us a proper map. But if we are not following along, if we are second guessing ourselves or second guessing the light that God has shown, then it can become very, very treacherous. And that's where we're more likely to succumb to conspiracy theories. I'll leave it at that for right now. For a lot of these misconceptions to remain in our thinking and in our progression, we're going to stray off of that path leading to righteousness if we are saying, God, I don't know, you got to give me a sign, you got to give me some help. And he's saying, well, I've shown you all of this all along the way, and now you're coming to me saying, Lord, Lord, I don't know you. So these are the things that God is wanting us to, it's more than study, it's embody within our being. It's how to make what we hear into a fruit of our substance, of our behavior, of our thoughts, our words to one another. And where we are coming together right now at this point with the discussion of periods and menstruation is probably really hard for some people. And I'm going to put men predominantly into that category, cis men who are born males with the male parts. Because why are most men, or let me get it accurate. I don't want us to talk about people we don't know. So I am going to see first who is on this chat. Some of you I know, some I don't. So rather than pick on those that I don't know until I know you. I'm going to stick with, just because, like Zach, I'll get to know you and Troy, but right now I want to, in case there's points to make that I might get a little, the friends that know me know my humor, so I don't want to offend anybody. But Richard, I'm going to call on you if you've got an open mic.
I do.
Okay. So when you were growing up and before you arrived at your place right now, did you have an outlook? What was your outlook on menstruation? Did it even register on your radar, on your level of thinking in any way other than I don't want to hear it?
I would say I probably had zero awareness until I was definitely out of high school. My awareness level was literally zero.
Okay. And then as you got into adulthood, I mean, I know having a wife and kids kind of expand things a little bit, but how much did it expand it, if at all?
It didn't expand until maybe last year, to be honest.
Okay, so
or maybe the year before.
So when women equality of gender equality, when that came about, maybe?
Yes, yes, I was still embarrassed to buy tampons, and as many times as I went to the store to buy tampons, to pick them up for Elder Shaquetta or Soraya, I couldn't even remember the types that they used, and I would have to call them or FaceTime and ask them again and again what kind they had, and it was like it just didn't register, and yeah, yeah, and
it wasn't a priority for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, pads, not tampons. I'm sorry.
It wasn't a priority for you to have any level of sustained understanding on it.
Yes, because it didn't register to me how much it impacted them. It certainly didn't. To me, it had zero meaning. I could have been buying. Literally, I may have well been picking out. And I'm saying this just to be I could have been buying anything out of Walmart, anything, a bag of chips. It had zero bearing to me, until equality came.
So the step up from a lot of guys who bring their tongs or their something else to reach and grab them, because if they touch the bag of pads themselves, they've got cooties.
Oh yeah. I was embarrassed. I would as I would put them in the cart, I would put stuff over them to hide them. Yeah, it was pretty embarrassing.
Women feel the same way sometimes.
Yeah, but what's funny? Recently, it was maybe a couple weeks ago. I had to buy some pads, and I intentionally had them in my hand, and I walked around exposing them on purpose because I was like, I will not be embarrassed by this anymore. And I bought 2 boxes, and I exposed them as much as I could as I walked through Walmart. I was like, this is. So yeah, it was kind of
good
funny.
For you.
I'm kind of crazy like that.
That's awesome. That's one way to expose people's taboos, I guess. The uncomfortableness Bye, Angelia. It was so good to have you on here. Have a happy Sabbath. Okay, so David Brown, I see your name. Are you able to talk?
I'm here.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, thank you, Richard, for playing along.
All right, you're welcome. No problem.
All right, David.
Yeah, way to go,
what
Richard.
Thank you.
you set a good tone. All right, David. So what was, when you were growing up and you know, into adulthood, I guess let's first talk about when you were growing up at home, you know, right before
Okay.
going into your college years. What was your take on the female period?
Well, it was very different than Richard's. I would say I was like an early teen. Maybe I was 12. This is just a couple experiences I'll give you. Excuse me. My mom sent me down to one of the local markets because she had run out of pads, I think. And, you know, and at that age, I was a little embarrassed, but it wasn't anything like, you know, I was going to like freak out over, or like Richard said, try to hide it and all that stuff. I just went and did it, you know, and maybe I was just ignorant of the thing, but I knew my mom wanted it and she asked me to do it. So I was doing what I needed to do. And I knew that she had, she wouldn't ask me to do that unless, you know, she needed me to do that. So that might have been one of my first experiences. And it, I won't say it was negative necessarily, except that I knew that it was something to do with females. I've never done it before. And, you know, that kind of uncomfortable sort of thing. But, you know, I really wasn't, you know, freaked out or anything like that. So then, okay, so in my family, there's my mom, my dad. I have an older brother. Well, I used to have an older brother. He's died, and I'm the middle child. And then I had a younger sister. And so when my sister, she's 5 years younger than me. So I'm not sure exactly what age it was, how old she was when she had her first period. But I do remember that my mom and her, you know, were talking, and I wasn't there like listening, like what's going on kind of thing. But I just knew that this was going on. I don't know how I even knew, but I just knew.
Okay.
Probably, you know, that's really weird that you know stuff, but you can't recall why you knew that. But anyways, so I knew that this was something that, you know, it wasn't abnormal. It wasn't like, you know, they were hiding or, you know, there was any weird thing like that going on. It was just something that my sister was like, in a way, you know, just she was growing up now, and this is what she was going to be dealing with. And I don't remember her necessarily feeling really embarrassed, like looking at her brothers or anything like that. But so I didn't really get any negative vibes or anything out of that, right? So I just went along, you know, and I knew that this was something that was real, and guys don't have to deal with it. So a lot of the time it's just not on our minds, right? Until like something comes up around them, you know, da da da. So I think our homes are the biggest influencers of how we're going to deal with this, especially in younger ages, if we have any kind of exposure to it. Now, my son, he was an only child. So, and of course, he's a son, no daughters. So I don't really know when he's with that, because I never sat down with him and said, you know, son, there's going to be a time that you're going to need to know some information here. I didn't have that conversation with him. So I kind of feel bad now that all these things, you know, have come up and they're real. And now, you know, we see with our movement that this is something that probably fathers should have a conversation with their sons, definitely about, if not their daughters. So that's kind of my experience, but I will throw in another little story.
Yeah.
And this story is going to cultures, because I believe cultures have the hugest thing outside the home, because you're surrounded with it. You know, it's your neighbors, it's, you know, it's whoever, right? Okay, so my wife and I are traveling. She's not my wife then. And we're traveling on, we had a little sailboat from Florida down to like the Caribbean. Okay. And we've been gone for months and everything. And I don't know how to put this delicately, but.
Before we were Christians.
Okay, yeah, before we were Christians and we used to do things that Christians don't like to do. I'll say it,
Okay.
smoke dope. Okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
we're out there and you know, it's always kind of dicey because there's stuff going on out there. This is back in the 80s. I mean, drug smuggling between the Caribbean, the Bahamas, and Florida was absolutely nuts.
Huge.
That was back in the years of Miami Vice and all that stuff. I mean, we were approached many times, different situations that were, as I look back, pretty volatile. Things could have blown up and we could never been here. But here we are. God was watching over us. Okay, so all that to say is that we got down to, I think it was the Dominican Republic, and that's a Spanish culture. And the Spanish culture are very machismo. They,
Okay,
you know, used to talk about people that freak out about female, you know,
They send them out of the
sanitary.
village. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So this is like what's happening there. And so, you know, you meet a lot of people down there, like other boat people, mainly because you speak English and they're out there doing the same thing you're doing, right? So one of the guys says, hey, you know how to hide your dope when you're going to come into a harbor and stuff? He says the best place to hide it is get your wife's tampons and everything and pile it all up, and you just put it all behind there, because as soon as they open up the cabinet and they look and see that, they'll slam the cabinet shut and they won't even touch it. So I always
That's
filed that in the
hilarious.
back of my mind, you know, like, oh, so that's how it is. And, you know, I don't think that would pass the mustard right now. They would probably make those guys, you know, do a thorough search, but, you know,
This is immigration.
yeah, this is mainly like immigration, and they have the right to come on your boat and check you out and that kind of stuff.
I'm going to acknowledge that
that was
Troy's
another-
leaving. Thanks for joining us for Sabbath, Troy. I'll pick on you next time. So Zach, get ready. I'm going to ask you next, but keep going, David.
Okay, so basically that was kind of the story about it was a cultural thing, and to me it was laughable because I had no stigma with the whole thing. You know, it just, you know, I worked in hospitals for years and years, so I basically, you know, was running into different situations and stuff that, you know, you need to have your game face on when you're, no matter what you're running into in a hospital. You don't need to freak out about anything, or you're not going to, you know, be a very good influence, or you're not going to be able to do your job very well. So that was kind of not an issue on me. It never has been. But since all the things going on with the movement and stuff, it's really opened my eyes on to see how, I want to choose my words good here, but how disconcerting and maybe just downright disrespectful it's been in probably the all entirety of history, but for sure now on this whole subject. It's really been bad, but I seem like so many things, you know, it's time for the world to grow up a little bit here. And I think we're trying to do that in our movement, and I know I am too. But yeah, I don't really have a lot of opportunities to go out in public and, you know, you know, say something to the girls or anything like that. But I just want to be ready if it ever comes up to be, you know, extra compassionate about these kind of things. So that's kind of my spiel.
I'm gonna say that one more time.
That's kind of my story.
Okay. Well, and I've kind of gotten a few action points that I'll touch on at the end, because with any good thought-provoking concept, there's action steps that come with it. And there are things that we can be a part of. We can do each in our own lives, from the start of just educating ourselves to educating those within our sphere of influence to, okay, what are other people doing in our community or in other communities that we can participate in or help duplicate in our community. So thank you, David, for your input on that. And I don't know
You're
if
Zach is gone.
Zach is gone. So Bob, you're up. What we're discussing, Bob, if you've got an ability to talk.
I can.
Okay, so what we're discussing that I didn't see it for the first part, you probably picked up a little bit, but how, as a man, how did you come to understand the period, the menstrual cycle in your own life as a young man through right now? In a few minutes time, just to share like how, not necessarily, but maybe how your viewpoint has changed, or like one thing that I don't know if you heard Richard say, that it was something that really didn't register on his radar until the message of equality came about. So how about you? How did you come to an understanding of the period of menstruation?
Okay, I can keep this short. Mine's similar to Richard's. And when I was growing up, I mean, I'm the oldest of 7, and I have 6 brothers and sisters. Obviously, there's me, and then I have a brother, and then I have 4 sisters and another brother. We're all close in age, and my parents, even when it came to even talking about anything sexuality, I didn't. It was never discussed. I mean, it was just, we were just taught. My mother's basically, my dad never taught me hardly anything. My mother's would taught us whatever we knew, and all she said was that is your body, and you're supposed to respect each other's bodies, and that's all she told me. I mean, this might sound crazy, but even as a kid growing up, when I was being taught how to, be able to stand up as a boy and pee in the toilet, I mean, I was told, you handle your body. So I was just called, that my penis, my body, because I didn't even know that was called a penis. I mean,
Okay.
I grew up very naive with all this stuff. And as far as my exposure to the menstruation and all that stuff, I basically, I don't know if it's because of how sheltered I was, and I don't know that I was sheltered, but I was just really so caught up with everything else in my life that was going on and the things I was doing, it wasn't even on my radar. I mean, yes, that I come across a tampon and things like that and realized that it was something I did, but it didn't faze me, and I didn't know anything about it. And in fact, I didn't even put together the whole birds and the bees thing until I was in 8th grade, and I was going through a sex education training that they were actually giving in the school. And I came home after going through this study that they gave us. I think it was all in one afternoon. They just pile it on you. And I came home, my head was kind of spinning. I'm like, whoa, I never knew all that, And so I was just very naive. And so in my house, nothing was taboo about it. But on the other hand, it was never talked about either. So it was like it didn't even exist. That it was kept so much under the radar that it was not there. And so my first exposure to it directly wasn't until I was 18 or 19 years old, and I started having any kind of friendships with other females. Then I started to get to know more, but I didn't know anything about it before then. And that's all I can say. And the other point I'm just to bring out is, it seems to me that across a certain society, there are certain things that that people will tend to do or not do. And when it comes to this subject and societally, but then within the society, you obviously have different nationalities that play into it. And then I think there's a religious factor is the biggest one. And there's so many, the United States is such a melting pot of religion. But when you look at all of it, I mean, I think there's a lot of other stuff there. So, I mean, I was never taken back by it. I never thought it was ugly. I never thought it was dirty. I never thought any of those things, but I'm a very practical thinker. And so it's just, but so I was never inculcated that it was some taboo bad thing. It was just something that was just like, it was none of my business. And so I was just kind of left out of the loop. You know, that's my story.
Okay. So you brought up an interesting point, and I think Richard kind of touched on this too, of since it didn't affect you, and David, I don't know if you agree or not. I didn't hear you touch on this as the other two did, but the out of sight, out of mind, well, it's not an issue of mine, so I'm not going to invest much time, effort, or energy into trying to understand it. So I'm just going to go about my day as a guy. And yet the contrast, so if you think about all the things that a guy has to deal with, right? So just the different equipment, you know, the parts of the body that are different from males and females. Not only do men know how to handle their own body that way, but women are taught. Okay, I mean, it's not necessarily like, you know, on the school board, here's where the urine forms and here's where it comes out. Not necessarily like that, although that's what our health classes ought to be covering. But just a working knowledge of how, you know, the ways that men have to use their body, it's pretty well known. Women really probably didn't have much of a problem, you know, understanding what the processes that guys went through, because why? Anybody know? Can anybody think why would it be that guys would have all of their issues publicly known and addressed? Maybe not, you know, like, I mean, to the point where Viagra is talked about without, you know, a advisory label. Penis pumps, the same thing. All of these different accessories, or even like the urinals. I mean, there's a level of education that I am finding that everybody has about men, but it's not. This is where the inequality, one of the inequalities, are very, very visible, because men don't have that equal understanding of all the ways that women have to, what they have to deal with. So that's part of what I'm hoping to do, of just hearing particular male perspectives, and then hopefully educating you guys on, okay, if you haven't considered these things before that women are having to deal with, it's part of our daily life that you didn't have to think about before, well, let's give them a look. Let's consider them now, because that's what equality means. If we understand, okay, so there's Adam and there's Eve. We understand Adam, but Eve is kept a mystery. Then how is there equality? Well, there can't be, right? I mean, this is kind of how our inequalities have permeated throughout our home life, throughout our culture, our religion, because of this. I think Aaron touched on this the other Sabbath. We were giving homage to the curse, right? Of saying that, well, men and women aren't equal because God didn't establish them as equal, right? It was the woman who fell, who beguiled the man, and then it's just all the woman's fault. And that's where we get a lot of the abuses of headship today. So when we look at what's going on with our understanding of men versus women, and we see how much more the men are understood than the women, it's not to continue and say, okay, well, we'll just try and catch up little by little. We'll just keep doing the things that we're doing, keep teaching the way that we're teaching, and just keep funneling women in there somehow, some way. It's kind of like the affirmative action of conversation or of societal norms, of just trying to keep women in the conversation somehow, but not fully, because we really don't want to talk about that blood stuff, right? Yeah. But the way in which we have to stop, and I think it's easier for us to stop during this pandemic because our whole systems have been disrupted. If we really have allowed them to be disrupted, the billionaires, they've continued to, have a very normal experience with the pandemic. So I'm still seeing that there's a lot of inequalities that the pandemic hasn't addressed, but yet making people stop and reevaluate, okay, why am I doing this? Why am I believing this? Why am I factoring this into my life when, maybe I need to do something more healthy and it looks different. Mm-hmm. So that's where I see the movement really picking up the paces on gender equality and really honing in on menstruation, because it is a huge issue that I did not realize how big it was until having the spotlight put on this subject. I had studied it somewhat prior in college or just independent, hearing little things here and there from friends or stories from other people all around the world. But there is a very significant reason that we're looking at this now. I don't think I fully understand what that significant reason is. All I keep going back to, and the things that I keep reading say, this is the piece that will bring equality for everybody. There's a book, I'll actually talk about at the end, give you all the different sources that I've been to, that I've researched, or that I have used in the research. But the task of equal understanding what women go through is really not as simple as I think, maybe we have in our minds that it ought to be. We ought to just, okay, so women need these things, and that's okay, I'll just continue on with my life. Because there's more to it than just providing women with these items to take care of themselves properly during their period, but also the understanding of sometimes it's okay not to expect anything out of a woman during that time, because there are all these other factors at play. But then also taking another step back and seeing, okay, there has been for so long these jokes and these ridicules that women have faced for this. I mean, so much so. I mean, for probably since the beginning of the curse. You know, even in, I think it was Leviticus, that the women were starting to be separated during their issue. If you were to do a search on scripture references for menstruation, a lot of it is called issue. And I also did a search in scriptures for women, or woman, just woman, singular, and bleed, blood, issue, in the separate searches. And I invite you all to do that, just to see for yourself how the word deals with that in its proper context of the time, but also, you know, kind of looking at what they were doing. So in Old Testament, they were sending women out of their city. There's a book that I remember my mom reading years ago, maybe a couple decades ago, called The Red Tent. And that shared a lot of stories in it that discussed how the taboos of women's menstruation, of how the period was dealt with in different cultures and different societies, and how we've really not outgrown those. So maybe it's too big of an ideal, but I'd like to try and chip away at some of those misconceptions, but I know we all still have. And I say we all because I'm still finding things within my understanding that needs a little tweaking, that needs expanding even. There are more things that how's the saying go, there are more things that you know that you don't know than you know that you know. If we're really being honest about things. And so when we look at how scripture, how the church has addressed the period issue, female menstruation, you can see that it is just a totally keep the women separate. Let's not even look at it. Let's not even talk about it. It's just something that they have to deal with because that's their curse. That's their correction to the curse. But is that still true for us today? And the more that we're witness to these studies of God bringing about restoration in mankind, we have to be honest and say, okay, those conversations where everything was separate, now we have to go back and we have to really look at them. And I'm seeing that men are really struggling with this. I'm not gonna assume that Zach jumped off because of this topic, but there are, and I'm gonna, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to say anything if he was back on, but to use that as an example, because I know when Elder Tess did but the study on 724, talking about menstruation, and we started the discussion in the Bible chat, that was when I noticed at least 2 other guys just bailed off of the discussion. And so maybe that's me taking it personally, but you know, it seems that this is something that, oh, Anna, thank you for sharing that. So Zach is your little brother. Okay. So that was a case where I went to a place that wasn't accurate, right? So my thinking that, okay, I did something to cause this person to leave is obviously not true. So thank you, Anna, for bringing that to my attention. But yet, I think we have all of these different ideas of how, or at least I do, of how things are going to be accepted. And so far, just in my life, I've seen predominantly more, like, there are 2 things that I've seen within my own experience. One, where the guys don't want to talk about it, the girls don't want to talk about it. So there's the not wanting to talk about it, and then there's the just moving on. So the women just not wanting anybody to make a fuss and just barreling through and going on with their day. And this is what led me to, so I've got to make a correction to my previous video on 724. I know it hasn't been uploaded yet. So this is great to be able to kind of get ahead of my misspeaking, because right away, last presentation, I said that it was really important for us to not judge another person's experience. When a person says that they're having an experience, or that they're feeling a certain way, or they think that they're perceiving something a certain way, it's really important to honor that person's experience rather than, you know, brushing it off and saying, no, you're not. You're just being small-minded or whatever. I made the really bad mistake of, you know, I think it was like maybe a minute or 2 later, of saying that the women that reported having, you know, very little issues, very little pain or discomfort or embarrassment with their periods might not be telling the truth. I'm apologizing for that, because 1, I was doing what I said not to do, which was invalidating somebody's experience. And I think the reason why is because of my own prejudices, because of my own living of life and just pushing my pain or my complaints or seeking for special allowances, just pushing all of that to the side, and then becoming, I guess, suspicious of other women who say that, well, you know, I haven't had any problems. You know, it hasn't affected my life at all. And saying, I don't necessarily believe you, simply because in my own life, when I had that outlook of, you know, everything's fine, there's no trouble here, it was me trying to put on a face to show the world that nothing was wrong, that I could just, you know, deal with anything and just keep moving. And so anybody who took offense to me saying that, I understand my psychology behind it, that I wasn't actually saying anything negative against you, it was against me. So I do apologize for that. But on the spectrum of understanding that we have of going from in the dark to fully visible, having all of these undercurrents of mystery around the period, around menstruation and cycles of a woman's monthly pattern of blood loss, of going through what her body was designed to go through. Do we need to give ourselves allowances and say, I really do need to take a step back and not work this hard, or I need to sleep right now? Yes. But everybody needs to honor their own process. So while I'm seeing, those respondents having relatively low embarrassment, low rates of, there wasn't much, goodness, the word is on the tip of my tongue, inconvenience. Well, there's a good smattering of very low, so this is the pain scale from my last talk. So there's 12 women that I got their experiences from, and I've heard from 2 others since then. So I need to add in their information as well. But I really want to just talk about what I've already done before adding anything more. So while there's within the movement, within our sphere of knowledge, there's more that have a lighter experience, have less embarrassment, have less pain, have an easier time during their period, versus those who would just really like to curl up and die. We all have to give ourselves, we have to honor ourselves first, and then honor another person's experience, and to be able to be there and empathize with them without, I guess, I'm thinking about a guy being on the listening and on the receiving end of someone's story. How can, instead of guys saying, oh, nope, that's not my issue, as priests, are you allowed to do that? To say, oh, nope, whatever issue a woman has with her body, don't come to me as a man and seek help. Wouldn't it be nice if one day we had all of these inequalities dealt with, to where a woman, or even a trans male, so a man who was born with female parts, who transitioned into malehood but still has a period, how wonderful would it be for us to be able to, for anybody to be able to counsel that person, rather than, okay, women are to counsel women and men are to counsel men, and we're retaining these gender structures, because that's definitely what we're called to destroy, are these gender structures, these rigid fixtures in our minds of how a person is to be in this life, be one to another. We've already had those studies where it's not about what we are dressed like. It's not the words that we say. It's not the foods that we eat that make us priests. I mean, in a way it is, but in another way, this is where the equality, you know, has to be worked out, because in all of those ways that we're not equal in this movement, where men still have uncomfortableness saying anything to a woman regarding her period, or even just, you know, offering a shoulder to, you know, for the woman to talk to or to cry on just because she's emotional. For men and women to recognize, okay, this is just something that this person is going through. So for women to see a trans male cry, and because they've got their period right now, that's compassion, to be able to meet that person and say, talk to me, what's going on, what can I do to help? You know, to the extent of maybe even if, like people who have various jobs with like first responders, paramedics, anybody who carries a first aid kit or a go bag, put some feminine hygiene products in there, regardless of your age or whether or not you use them or don't, because somebody one day that you'll come across will need them. And if we understand the importance of how that matters to people who are impoverished, who are maybe not very welcome, maybe they're you know, cis or trans, but there's not a bathroom that they feel comfortable going to, or another outlet where they can just have an ear to talk. There's so many opportunities that we can wield our knowledge and our influence that God is giving us, to use it for good. And it's not necessarily this picture of, you know, like doing good in our minds, maybe, of like going around with great controversies, or you know, soup kitchens. This is a level of helping people that it's on a different plane. It comes from the trumpet that makes a certain noise. It's something that's distinguishing about our movement that I'm aware of. So, but before we can get to that level of equality where we, as a male or a woman, coming in contact with a cis or trans woman and being given this opportunity to help them, we have to unlearn some things, let go of some baggage, and kind of relearn what it is to be equal in the eyes of God. Where is this line of restoration? What does that mean for us? Since we're closer to the end than we are to the beginning, what does that mean for us now? Was bleeding a part of a woman before the fall? Or is that only after? Because it only talks about pain after the fall. So I'm not answering that now. I'm just posing, these are things to think of, like how it is that we're to approach these topics, these conversations, in a prophetic manner. And the differences between men and women are largely false. They're largely constructs of the counterfeit understanding of equality, or just the half-truths that have gotten into our thinking, into our into our church doctrines, but most importantly, just into our everyday vocabulary. And that's what we need to focus on correcting, those things within our sphere, but then also once we're able to see and to manage all within our sphere, and not just manage it, but to help it to grow, to help our immediate family culture, church culture thrive, but then also our larger city culture or town or village, wherever you live, how we approach this topic may actually be very central to the whole underpinnings of civilization. So there's a couple of things that I talked about last time that I'm just going to review real quick because I want to get to other things. But so one of the references that I pointed out that Sakai gave me was the Bleed Read, and she also talked about, or she also gave me the site. No. Grace and Grace and Nellie. No, how is Nellie spelled? Just a Y. I think that's dot. Nope. .org. Okay. And then I'll get to the other ones, but these two had some really good source material for just getting familiar with another person's struggle through life. And it's interesting. So growing up in I went to a Catholic church school from kindergarten through senior year of college. So I had one school from kindergarten through 8th grade, and then another Catholic school in high school. And I remember, I think it was high school, that I remember learning about, that they were teaching that the female period is our unique opportunity to share in the suffering of Christ. And, I don't think that really disturbed me until joining the movement, and especially after understanding there's no need for suffering. Christ does not call us to add suffering to our lives, or it seems kind of pagan, right? Having the us as sacrifices is a pagan concept, rather than Christ being the one who suffered everything. And we are just needing to give our suffering over to him. And so what does that mean for a woman having a period when you are definitely suffering and there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it? Sure, if a person feels better having that mentality of sharing in the suffering of the world, that's that person's conscious decision to do that. That's their right. There's a word that I'm blanking on. Their freedom of conscience. So before I go further, does anybody have questions or a question? Have I lost everybody or put everybody to sleep?
No. We're here. It's good.
No, it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm glad to hear the no, Lana. Thanks. It's more just for me to get you guys involved rather than like, yeah, it feels good to have people respond back, but mainly just to help you guys stay engaged. It could be so easy to just one-sidedly just to talk, but there's something that I saw with my mom a couple days ago where is a segment of the news. Seth Meyers does. Sometimes the news is just so much more enjoyable coming from a comedy standpoint. But so Seth Meyers is talking with Amy Poehler, and they're having a discussion. She makes this point, which I actually hadn't thought of before, where she said, Seth, I just want to have a discussion about the news rather than it just coming from you and you telling everybody what to think, like a dictator. I was like, oh, so women are, our way is have everybody involved in the conversation, to share rather than to just to throw out our own viewpoint and say, see, isn't this great to see it like this? Now we all need to, I can see that being more of that male driven, male dominant, patriarchal societal thing that we've just become very accustomed to. So I'm really reining myself in from, because the way I see things, I think I see it really, really cool, and I want to share this with you, how I see things. But it's not about me at all. It's about where you guys are at and how to advance in our understanding. So the Bob, you're in construction. I spoke to I had two sources that gave me information on that, two females for this study that are in construction also. And they were talking about how difficult it is for them to work on a construction site when they have their period, because the porta potty isn't equipped with what they need, or there's not a discreet way to dispose of period products, and I'm guessing that that's just another one of those things that if we're not going through it, we don't think about it. So not to get down on you, Bob. I mean, it's just something to ask you of, like, had you worked with females before in construction, or had you heard of their struggle that they'd had with working on the job as a menstruating woman?
I can say that, most of my experience was with working with other men. There weren't too many women involved. And so I can recognize that they don't have facilities and things for them. And it's eye-opening to recognize this now. I never thought of it because I just never thought of it. But a lot of it, you have to understand that, we can look at something that somebody does, like somebody getting off of the meeting today or whatever, and we can, without knowing the motive or what's involved, we can assign something to it, that we shouldn't. And I know when it comes to, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for David or Richard or any other man that's in the movement. But I know that if I've never discussed or talked about this subject before with any other women, it was out of respect that was a private subject that they didn't want to talk about either. So if they weren't going to go there, then I wasn't going to go there. But I have no problem with discussing any of this stuff. And your point earlier about the priests, And I agree that we all have to realize that it's not just a woman's issue or a menstruating person's issue, to say it correctly. It's all of our issue, because we're all in this together. And that's what true equality is, and just realizing that point. And the Holy Spirit's helping me to come up to speed there. And I understand, as a movement, we all have to come up to speed, and then we have to be able to represent correctly that whole mindset and have the mind of Christ as we go forward to the rest of the world, to the Levites and the Nethinims.
Yeah.
I got something to say.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm on Catherine's phone.
Oh, good.
I grew up, and my mom was in construction as well. My dad was usually a superintendent or a contractor or whatever. So I grew up with my mom on and off a job site, and my family, my wife, my daughter, and a couple of friends of ours have been on the job sites as well. So we always try to provide at least a separate porta pot, so that the women don't have to deal with the nastiness of a typical construction porta pot. But I can honestly say I never thought about adding an extra trash can or something like that to help with the woman's needs. It has crossed my mind before, what are you supposed to do? But other than that,
Yeah.
it didn't go any farther than that.
Yeah. And that's what the two women that I talked to were, I think this is more of, well, maybe it's more of a conscientious human thing where, not just a female thing, of like assessing a situation and saying, okay, how can I leave as little trace of myself behind? How can I go into that porta potty and not make it more messy, especially if it's mixed genders. Just thinking about a guy looking down and seeing a tampon in the toilet basin of the porta potty. It's embarrassing for some reason, right? Because maybe just because we've pushed this so much into the corner of our taboos. But that's the facts of it, of women just feeling so embarrassed to have this seen by men in particular. That's just something that I think we're going to have to excavate ourselves out of, that mindset. But thank you, James, for sharing that. I was looking for your name, so I'm glad that you spoke up, because Troy was going to be the other one I was going to ask, because I saw his name come back, just to get the male perspective on your views on the period. So James, I'm going to get your full account, and as best you can summarize in a minute or so, of your understanding of the period growing up and then transitioning into who you are now, and how that changed. Have you seen or made note of any changes to your understanding of the period, or is it just, like some of the other guys are saying, that it just didn't even register on their radar?
As far as in life in general, or just on the construction site?
Life in general. This is just getting your story.
Well,
And if you don't want to talk about it.
No, it's fine. I don't have a problem at all. I guess, honestly, until, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but until my daughter became of that age, I guess I really didn't pay attention to it. I didn't talk about it with my wife. I didn't want to talk about it with my wife. But by the time my daughter was of age, we were in a completely different way of life. by that time. You know, we had become Christians and things of that nature. But since really since working with my daughter and my wife more recently, I've paid a lot more attention to it, and I've really thought about it more since it was brought up within the movement. How it isn't really, you know, talked about. I've put a lot of thought into that, and it's interesting how we do avoid it without. It's like a subconscious avoidance. You know, you don't have to really go out of your way to not talk about it or not think about it. It's just that's the way you grew up. That's the way the world is. So I particularly have really appreciated your talks on it. The last time and this time, it's been, I think very helpful.
Always glad to hear that. But I wouldn't have unless it wasn't brought up first by Tessa Parmenter. So it's and when they did, it was like, okay, I know what I've got my charge. I know what I'm going to be talking about for a little while now. But thank you, James, for sharing that. Troy, are you able to weigh in? Are you still with us? Maybe not. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, gotcha. That's so sweet. All right, thanks for the heads up. Okay, so just kind of regroup here and re-summarize some things. So we've come to the understanding that, and so there are two things. I think Bob and James, you said this, you made a point of, or no, not Bob, David, of you know, like talking about your lives before you became Christian and then after, is that how much of a change does Christianity add to becoming Christian, add to the weight of the period, or of talking about menstruation, or accepting, you know, maybe I'm not formulating the question properly, because I heard both of you guys talk about, both David and James, just note their lives before Christianity and then after, and in respect to you know, the understanding of menstruating, of people who have periods. What's the distinction? Can I get anybody's input on what is it that created, or is it just is there a line that Christianity drew in your minds of, okay, now I have a different understanding of the world? Or is that even making sense? Like I'm trying to see like how that delineation, how that that distinct adherent, or that distinct speaking of having a life before Christianity and a life after, like how is your understanding?
You mean real
of the
Christianity?
period?
Or
Yeah,
like the fake
like
Christianity?
No, the real Christianity.
So like the movement of Christianity, you're saying?
Yeah, and you know, and maybe that's just my understanding of Christianity, but hearing both James and David talking about you know, their lives before Christianity and then their lives after Christianity, was there so much of a difference before versus after of how you approached menstruation? Was it anything to do with Christianity, or is it simply of this movement bringing to light this this concept of gender equality that kind of brings the period into focus. Is that making it clear?
With me, I don't want to speak for anybody else.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily draw the distinction between the movement and typical Christianity. I just mean Christianity in my own personal walk. Before I really became a Christian, I didn't care about anybody. Not that I wasn't selfish after becoming a Christian and continuing to walk in that path. Hopefully I'm every day less and less selfish. But I know just because I decided to follow God, I wasn't automatically not selfish. But before I decided to follow God, I was absolutely selfish. I didn't think about Wendy or women at all. And when we decided to become Christians and put our life, wanting our life to be more involved with Christ and with others, I saw needs that I didn't see before, like before, I guess Wendy and I were married 13 years before I really became a true Christian, and we never had a trash can in our house in the bathroom, not that closed or, nothing like that. And when we became Christian and moved up here, every bathroom all of a sudden had trash cans, and we started looking for trash cans with lids so that nobody was uncomfortable with anything. And, littler things like that, not maybe not in depth things on menstruation, but littler things that weren't there before.
Yeah. Oh, that makes perfect sense. Hi, Kathy. Oh, I just saw your picture show up. Did you have something that you wanted to?
Something.
Oh yeah, go ahead, David.
Well, I probably wasn't very clear about Christianity there.
Okay.
When I was referring to Christianity earlier, it was in the context of when we were on our sailing trip and the kind of extracurricular activities that we were doing. Obviously, we weren't Christians then, but like my former years, see, this is kind of tricky when you talk about Christianity, and James touched on it because, there's a lot more sincere Christians, and I'm going to go out on a limb right now, that are more sincere Christians than even some people in the movement. Yeah, you could just see that some places, that these people are really, that they're going to be probably Nethinims, just because of the way they are, the way they carry themselves. So that's just going to the Christianity thing, because I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm a doomed person. I'm a fourth generation Adventist. It's everything I know, everything my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents. I mean, I was just, that's all, my history is. And like the fourth generation, when I became able to make my own choices late in high school type of thing, I was like, Jonah, goodbye. I'm done with this. I don't want to know anything about what is going on. I'm tired of this. And a lot of it was just because it was a rules kind of thing. And it wasn't a relationship kind of thing. So that was my experience until I was actually, I had my son, and I was in my 40s before I decided. I was 41 before I decided that, I'm going to really figure out what is this Christianity thing and Adventism and all. And so that's when I would say that that's when I was baptized. I was never baptized as a kid. I know, a lot of Adventists, you go through their schools and everything like that, and you're in the group, and the group goes through the studies, and you're all baptized. But for some reason, I don't know how it happened, I was always like on the periphery of that. It didn't quite click wherever I was, and I didn't get in on, I call it almost forced baptisms, because you're expected basically to be baptized as a kid, and I really wasn't. And I think the Lord was reserving me out of this Laodicean Adventism until I was ready to be serious and think about this as an adult and make decisions in that direction. So that's a lot of words to say that, it's complicated to me about this thoughts about menstruation and everything before and after being a Christian. I think the same trend is sort of carried through my whole life about the subject, as far as how I felt about it and how I would, I wouldn't talk about these things to girls or anything, because I want to be sensitive to them. It's not so much that, I wouldn't have a problem talking about it. It's a fact, it's life, it's biology. We get a little crazy here. That's what it really is, because then the emotions get into it, and the stigmas and all that kind of stuff. So I really, would avoid the subject, or not bring it up or anything, because I felt sensitive to ladies or females that, I don't want to cause any issues or issues, problems with, bringing up a sensitive subject, unless I knew they brought it up. If they brought it up, I wouldn't have a problem discussing it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So as far as before and after Christianity, I can't say it. I definitely would say, oh, I had a change. I was baptized and suddenly I'm, feeling, better about it. And I doubt, I never even heard this mentioned. The only time I really remember anything is Leviticus. And one thing that always sticks in my mind is when Rachel is coming, not Rachel, is it Jacob's wife? What's her name?
Yeah,
Is it Rachel?
Rachel.
Okay, for some reason I didn't sing right.
Leah.
She's sitting on top of what was she sitting on top of?
Idols.
Yeah, that's right. She was hiding the idols, and then no one would go and search what she was sitting on because they knew that she was having her period month. And
It was a
that
cushion.
kind of is an interesting story. There's a lot, I think, in that story right there that I've never heard anybody
That's
preach on that one.
Yeah,
Anyways,
that might be because I remember that now, of like, she was sitting and thinking, okay, she was just sitting on it. Why didn't they ask her to get up? But now that you say that, and that, I think that needs a little bit more fleshing out. Thank you.
I was trying to think of the stories in the Bible where this is, I always think of the lady that had the issue of blood for 12 years, but there's not really like parable stories. There's the law, it's unclean, and then where are the real stories? I was kind of wanting to look into that a little bit. Anyways, I'll shut up.
Oh, you're good. Thanks for adding all that, because the one thing that, or one of the other things that I got out of Elder Terry's her sermon study was that I guess it was somebody else in the audience, was talking about Jesus. So I think this is Luke chapter 7. Pretty wrong now that I think of it, where Jesus is, this woman who has a bleeding issue for 12 years touches the hem on Jesus's garment, and she's immediately healed. And somebody in the audience said that that was proof that Jesus was making that a prophetic thing, like making it that's not the wording that was used, but just bringing it to the mind of the movement then anyway, and especially for applicational purposes for us now, to see that one, that she's not 30, so she had this bleeding disorder for 12 years. She would have normally, any other day, she would have been separate from everybody, because bleeders they are kept in a separate part of the city. And so for her in particular to be of 12 years, in my mind, I would think that would almost put her in the category of a leper. And oh my goodness, I'm way over on time, so I'll wrap this up quickly. But the statement that was made was, and this is on the Midnight Watch channel, Elder Terry's just last night, or the night, yeah, just from our time period, last night she did this, but it was their Sabbath morning. So she's talking about how there's this person in the audience is asking Terry, okay, so this woman touches the garment on Jesus, and Jesus says that your faith has healed you. So he's not addressing the uncleanliness or the, you know, I mean, that's just, I think that's also kind of stripped away by the healing of the lepers and all of these other things, that the people have it in their mind, the Hebrew people, the Israelites have it in their minds that the Jews during the time of Christ, that these people are unclean and not suitable for God to touch them. And so when God is touched by one, then the woman posing the question to Elder Terry just said, okay, so doesn't that have some significance to Jesus kind of addressing, without it directly addressing, this issue of menstruation and how we have had a warped understanding of it? And I thought that was a really good point that we should all consider. But there are a few other points that I'm just very quickly, I'm going to write down the sources. So we've got the unwomen.org that brought up a really good chart that talked about like the kind of the average process that a woman or a menstruating person goes through, and then it gives the stats. So talking about the how the impoverished or those that don't have access to hygiene products, I mean, period products, I still call it hygiene because I guess in a way it still is keeping yourself clean, but at the same time, to actually look at the blood aspect, it's not unclean. The period blood, they actually studied this, it's no different in I mean, there's a little bit more fluid in period blood, but it's not any dirtier than the blood that's in your veins, if that makes sense. So, you know, there's another preconceived idea that we need to strip away. But the Bleed Read, Grace and Melly, those are really good. Then we've got, this is a site put up by lawyers, periodequity.org. And this has been categorized by states, what the what bills, what laws are still governing your state that taxes women unfairly. There's something called the pink tax or the tampon tax that that adds an additional luxury tax to tampons or pads that a toilet paper roll wouldn't garnish. So, you know, it's, and then periodequality.org is also trying to go a step further and stripping all sales tax off. So just charging, you know, as little as possible, or putting products in schools, public places for free, so it's freely accessible. Of course, you can find out more going to their website. And then there is, Elder Tess brought this TED Talk to all of our awareness on the media broadcast channel. So this is a TED Talk, TEDx. person's name, the woman's name is, and this is TEDx Ohio, but if you go to the media channel, you'll find it. Anusha Singh. And this is just called Period, sorry. Really, really great if you haven't listened to that already. I think Elder Tess shared that earlier this week, maybe last week. Grace and Ellie talked about this other book. This book might need to be, like we might have to have our own study just on this book, Periods Gone Public. It is a must read. So this, in particular, this book, Periods Gone Public, and I meant to write down the author's name, but hopefully you'll be able to find it pretty quickly. I found it from periodequity.org, but it very clearly laid out how periods are bringing equality to the forefront. So with period equality, we have workplace equality. Whether that's in the bathrooms or allowing, like on the construction site, you know, adding an additional feature for women. This is educational equality, because women miss more school than guys do just by having to deal with their periods, especially in third world countries or developing countries. Women are missing much more school, if not just banished from the schools altogether. This is equality of healthcare. Also racial equality. This bridges the racial divide on many levels just by looking at how the period can be made easier for women of all color, of all race, of all gender. So when I say women, it's not just the cis women, it's also the trans women. And this is also bringing about gender equality. Oops. And human rights, just basic human rights, is having access to period products just to be healthy. I mean, women who are, even in America, this happens, that where period poverty affects women. There is a Little Rock, I think she was in high school, THV Channel 11 on YouTube had a couple years ago. So if you just input a search, period poverty, Little Rock, you should be able to find it. It's 2 years ago, I think, or a year ago. This girl made it her mission. She was going to try and secure products for schools all throughout Arkansas. And then she also partnered with Period Equity to work on the pink tax, or the tampon tax, for Arkansas. And as of January 1st of this year, Arkansas House Bill, this is HR 1065, is the bill that is right now kind of stranded because it's gone into the Committee for Tax Evaluation, because of they're trying to get not just the luxury tax stripped away, but just sales tax in general. And why that is because men have that that privilege already. Penis pumps, Viagra, condoms, those are all free from taxation or you know, hindrance, really. I mean, any man can get them. So why not a woman who needs access to not just period products, but also period, like the hormones, the goodness, what's the word? The contraception, the pills. So that is what I have come to share with you guys a little bit more today. I hope to get a little bit more people working with me on this project and working with me, just inputting, giving me input on their stories for their periods, and so we can kind of create this this support network maybe for women, for those menstruating within the movement, but also maybe even small little booklets that can just like be scattered to the four corners, that women don't have to feel alone, or, you know, cis or trans women don't have to feel alone, that they're going through this process without anybody else, you know, having gone through it, because that's a necessary thing too. A lot of women, a lot of people who are menstruating don't have that support group. Most everybody that I talked to, that I kind of polled or gave like research questions to, had no idea of what a period entailed until they got it. Their families really didn't educate them, and so I would like to change that with this conversation, and just to be a better beacon of hope and light for those that don't quite understand their body or the processes that it has. But does anybody else have a question or want to add anything before I say goodbye?
Yes, I have one question about the link for the UN site.
Yep.
What exactly? I know it's the unwomen.org. Was there a more pinpoint link within that, or a section within that link?
So that's the only thing that my phone allowed me to pull up, but there you might be able to do a search for end the stigma dot period. So
Okay.
the name of the chart that I referenced is from unwomen.org, and maybe to do a search within that for end the stigma period.
Okay, thank you.
That should get that. Now I'm seeing this needs to come down so you can see the bottom of the board a little bit better. So end the stigma period, and I'll try and find that chart too and share it in the Lambert chat, because I know it's on the big Bible chat. But okay, anybody else?
I just want to thank you for this study. It was really helpful, very, very good. And
Good.
also there was hoping that you can, on the chat, if you could take a picture for the,
Oh, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
thank you.
Yep, I sure will. You're welcome. And speaking of the chat, just making sure. Oh, okay.
You went mute.
Thanks. Okay, so thank you, everybody. I'm glad that it was helpful, informative, and last chance for anybody to ask questions. Let me see. Oops, somebody said something. Thank you, Anna. Anna, actually, are you able to be on a microphone to give our closing prayer? It's okay if you're not. I'm just asking. Okay. Then Penny, are you available? I thought I saw. Oh, yep. I see you still. Penny, are you able to get to a microphone to do our prayer?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this beautiful Sabbath day that you have given us, and for this message that our dear friend Alyssa has given us. Please help us to continue to learn and grow, and may you bless each and every one of us this day. We thank you for everything in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you,
Amen.
Penny.
All right.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Yeah.
thank you, Alyssa. That was a blessing. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Well, thank you for your valuable input. It wouldn't have been the same without y'all.
Amen. That's great. All right. God bless everyone. Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath. Bye-bye.
Happy Sabbath. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Happy Sabbath.
Bye.
Bye now.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath, Carol.
You too. Love you.
Thank you. Love you too.